Early 20th century China was an ideological melting pot, which saw the emergence of and support for different ideas against the backdrop of events such as the Boxer Rebellion and the fall of the Qing dynasty. For example, Chairman Mao, who was a student during the New Culture period, cites the Chinese anarchist movement as an influence for him at that point in time, and may have joined the Chinese Communist Party because of its association with anarchism. Fundamentally, anarchism is a method of social organization and the belief in the abolition of all authority, hierarchy and power structures, such as the nation-state, capitalism and organized religion. The Paris Group advocated for a cosmopolitan, utopian and futuristic revolutionary anarchism, which completely rejected classical Chinese thought with a focus on scientific advancement and modern technology as cornerstones for progress. They believed in a violent social revolution in order to overhaul their current hierarchical society, and their education focused on morality and public-mindedness was fundamental for achieving a full anarchist society. The Paris Society was also the first intellectual group to spread the idea of garnering mass peasant support for movements in China, as George Scalapino and George Yu write. The anarchists were wanting massive peasant worker support, and it was the anarchist movement that first introduced this concept in its modern form into the stream of Chinese political thought. The early Chinese anarchists paved the way for all subsequent travellers who chose to worship at the feet of the proletariat. Leaders of the Paris Group, Jiang Jingjiang and Li Shizheng, who both worked in the Chinese embassy in Paris, as well as Wu Zhihui and Cai Yuanpei, met the future first president of the Republic of China, Sun Yat-sen, in 1906 and joined his revolutionary alliance. Though they were skeptical of Sun Yat-sen's republicanism, they believed that the Revolutionary Alliance was a major chance to bring China towards socialism. However, as you can imagine, they were wrong about this. The Tokyo Group was formed around the same time and included two influential figures, Liu Shipei and his wife He Zhen. Liu was a classically trained scholar familiar with the works of Confucius and Lao Tzu, whilst He Zhen was given a more modern education. They had joined an anti-imperial society named the Restoration Society, but moved to Tokyo soon after due to increased attention into their activities by the government just after 1903. The Tokyo Group's journal, Natural Justice, was created in 1907 but ceased publication soon after in 1908 when Japanese authorities banned it. Natural Justice not only focused on the plight of peasants, but also women, with He Zhen contributing articles discussing the oppression of women under patriarchal power structures, and was critical of her contemporaries in the West leading the suffrage movement. Zhen criticized the suffrage movement's membership base, which mainly consisted of rich or wealthy upper-class women. Even if these members were to be elected, it would not be for sure that these women would use their power to help ordinary working-class women, and on top of this, it would set back any grassroots movements due to the facade of representation from women at the top of society. Though they were originally influenced by similar sources to the Paris Group, they developed a different perspective of anarchism by drawing inspiration from Leo Tolstoy's literature and classical Chinese ideas, focusing on agrarian rather than scientific-led anarchism. Liu Shipei argued, quite contrary to a lot of his contemporaries, that it was the teachings of Lao Tzu and Confucius, namely their advocacy of non-interventionism, that had stopped the imperial government from further intervening in society, partly explaining the Tokyo Group's support for an agrarian-based anarchism. Additionally, the Tokyo Group supported national liberation and self-determination for social revolution in China, in contrast to the Paris Group's cosmopolitan approach. As well as wielding intellectual power through the Paris and Tokyo Groups, Chinese anarchism also used violence as a means to achieving their goal. Chinese anarchist Liu Shaobin had joined Sun Yat-sen's Revolutionary Alliance and attempted to assassinate a navy commander named Li Jun, but failed and was imprisoned for 3 years. A member of the Paris Group, Wang Jingwei, who later became the president of Japan's puppet government during World War II, planned to assassinate the Qing Prince Regent Zai Fan in 1910, but also failed. After Wang's failure, Liu Shaobin, along with others, created the Assassination Corps, influenced by foreign organizations such as the Black Hand, which, as we know, Gavrilov Princip was part of. The Assassination Corps were quite active and had participated in numerous uprisings at this time, especially in the Guangzhou region. By the mid-1920s, anarchism had begun to lose influence in intellectual and political circles, as well as the labor movement as a whole. The nationalist Kuomintang and Chinese Communist Party had, by 1924, established an alliance called the First United Front, aiming to combat the extensive warlord problem in China in order to strengthen and unify the country. This bilateral partnership granted both parties the ability to institute themselves as significant military and political forces, amplifying their influence and support among the population. Perhaps because of this, Chinese anarchists saw themselves in an increasingly hazardous position since the CCP had commanded this newfound influence effectively, and as a result held sway over an ever-increasing portion of the Chinese labour movement. The May 30th movement in 1925 was a significant event that contributed to the increase in influence of the CCP. When the Shanghai police fired at and killed Chinese labour protesters, anti-imperialist protests erupted. In his piece Anarchism and Syndicalism in China, Muller writes that here the CCP could capitalise on its, by then well established, standing in the labour movement, boosting its numbers over the following months, while the anarchists, who had mixed feelings about the strong nationalist overtones in the labour movement and beyond, stood apart. The Communist Party was more than willing to capitalise on the nationalist and anti-imperialist sentiment of the workers in order to further its reach, allowing it to expand its influence over the labour movement. The anarchists' adherence to their core principles, in this case anti-statism, caused them to give up further ground within the labour movement to the CCP. The anarchists' doctrinaire approach to such issues worked heavily against them, and ultimately their goals of an anarchist revolution. Furthermore, by the 1920s, major Chinese anarchist figures, the aforementioned four leaders of the Paris group, Wu Zhihui, Li Shizang, Zhang Zhenjie, and Cai Yuanpei, identified the need for anarchists to organize and increase political involvement in order to maintain and gain influence in Chinese politics. They regarded the CCP as a direct threat to the goals of anarchism because they considered the CCP as being opportunistic in nature, whilst both movements focused on labour movements for support. Therefore, they sought to regain influence through working within the Kuomintang, or Nationalist Party. This decision by rather prominent anarchists created a divide within the movement, between those sympathetic with the pragmatic, collaborative approach and the younger, more radical members, who saw joining the Kuomintang as political suicide. This was also the case for the Tokyo group. By the early 1910s, He Zhen and Liu Shipei were found to be informants for Manchurian officials and were ousted for the group. Liu Shipei even later supported Yuan Shikai's attempt to become emperor, and died in 1919, aged 35 of tuberculosis. So these are just some reasons for the failure of anarchism in China, which has become a topic more widely debated upon in recent years. I think that the anarchist movement in China has been widely forgotten, but it has undoubtedly exerted a somewhat considerable influence on 20th century China as a whole.